Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're talking about moral relativism. So, moral relativism is the view that moral claims like murder is wrong, you should donate to charity, etc., that those claims are true or false relative to a specific culture or society or time and place in the world. So, moral claims don't apply universally, right? Moral claims aren't universal. They don't apply to everyone. They just apply to people in a specific culture or in a specific time and place. And they aren't objective because they're not independent of what we believe about them. If everyone in an entire society decided lying is fine, then now lying really is fine in that society. Right? So a moral relativist thinks that what's morally right or wrong depends on what we as a society think, what we believe, what we approve of. That determines what's morally right and morally wrong. Which means that what's morally right in one culture might be immoral in another culture. So when two different societies disagree about some piece of morality, they aren't really disagreeing. Each society is correct relative to their own morality. If one society thinks that, let's say, starting wars is good, and another society thinks that starting wars is morally wrong, then starting wars is good for that first society. They are right. It is morally good in their society. And the second society is right for their society. It really is wrong in their society. And there's no sense in which one society is right and the other is wrong. They're both right for their own society. So neither society is right or wrong. They're both right for their own society, but neither one's right or wrong, like full stop, right or wrong objectively. That's not a thing, according to the moral relativist. So here's I guess, meme format. I assume this is an old meme because I'm aware of it, and that usually means that it's sort of old and outdated. But this is sort of what relativism is. This is how relativism works. So if someone says polygamy being, non-monogamous relationships, having relationships with multiple partners, marrying multiple people. If someone says polygamy is morally okay, cultural relativist does not like that. But if you say, according to my culture, polygamy is morally okay, that's good. The moral relativist will accept. And if you say polygamy is not morally okay, just full stop, the relativist does not like that either. According to my culture, polygamy is not morally okay. That's fine. The moral relativist will accept that. So if you say just full outright polygamy is morally okay, or polygamy is not morally okay, and intend that to apply to everybody, then the relativist thinks that you're wrong. But if you say according to my culture or society or whatever, then now the moral relativist will accept that. Because nothing is morally right or wrong for everybody, full stop. Nothing's objectively and universally morally right or morally wrong, according to the relativist. Things are only right or wrong for some society. That's the only sense in which anything's right or wrong. It's just right or wrong for some society. If a society came out tomorrow thinking that murdering strangers in their sleep was morally good, then that is what is good in that society. That is morally right for that society, which is a source of an objection that we'll look at in a second. But so, for example, the moral relativist, let's look at the trolley problem. The moral relativist says that each culture or society has a right answer for the trolley problem. There is a right answer for your culture or for your society. But different cultures can have different right answers. The right answer for your society might be different than the right answer for another society. So if you think you should pull the lever, and let's say your sibling thinks you shouldn't pull the lever, then one of you is right and one of you is wrong. Because presumably you and your sibling are members of the same society and the same culture. And so you are subject to the same morality. Whatever your society's morality is, you and your sibling are subject to the same morality. So one of you's right and one of you's wrong for your shared society's morality. But if you think you should pull the lever and someone from a totally different culture thinks you shouldn't pull the lever, well, now you can both be right. You and your sibling can't disagree and both be right because you're part of the same culture. You're part of the same society. And either your society thinks you should pull the lever or your society thinks you shouldn't pull the lever. But if someone from a totally different culture disagrees with you, now maybe you're both right. Maybe you're not. Maybe one of you is wrong about your own society. That's fine. That happens sometimes. But you might both be right because you could both be right about what your own culture says about morality, your own culture's morality. If you're from two different cultures, then those cultures might give two different answers. And so even if you look like you disagree, you might both be right. You might not really be disagreeing because you're talking about your culture's morality and they're talking about their culture's morality. But you and your sibling can disagree and one of you can be right and the other wrong. You can't both be right if you disagree because you have the same society, you have the same culture, and so you're subject to the same morality. So if two members of the same society disagree, the moral relativist thinks one of them's right and one of them's wrong. But if two societies as a whole disagree, the moral relativist says neither's right or wrong. They're both right for their own society. And so one problem with this view is that it seems impossible to criticize the morality of another society. And at first, this might sound like a good thing, right? Criticizing other people's culture is kind of shitty. It's bad. You shouldn't do it. Criticizing other cultures is not a good thing. But specifically, when we talk about morality, you might think you should be able to criticize other cultures. You should be able to say Nazi Germany, 15th century colonizers, and the United States under Jim Crow laws, segregation laws. We're all morally wrong. You should be able to criticize the morality of the Nazis, you would think. But if you're a moral relativist, well, Nazi Germany is its own culture and society. And every society and culture has its own morality. So if you're a moral relativist, it looks like you're going to end up having to say that Nazi Germany was right, morally right, for its society. And that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound good. They were right relative to their own society, which seems like a problem. You might think, if you think back to when we talked about epistemology, G.E. Moore said that you should be able to accept that you have hands. And you know that you have hands better than you know any philosophical mumbo jumbo to the contrary. And you might think something like that here. You might think, I know that the Nazis were morally wrong. And I know that better than I know any of this philosophical stuff about what morality is based in and how it would be weird to say there are objective moral truths and all this stuff. I am more confident of Nazis being morally bad than I am of any of this stuff about, oh, how do we come to know moral truths or any of these problems for moral realism. You might think this is a Morean truth that you just know better than you know any philosophical stuff to the contrary, that Nazis are bad. You might think that's just a Morean truth, and that's not something you're willing to deny. But the moral relativist looks like they might have to deny it, strictly speaking. Because we can still say that Nazis are wrong relative to our society, and segregation and slavery were wrong relative to our society now. But we would have to say that relative to their society, the culture and time and place in which they existed, they didn't do anything wrong. Relative to their own society, they did nothing wrong. Nothing at all. And that seems hard. Put it another way, we'd have to say that Nazis and slave owners didn't do anything that was wrong at the time. But that's a hard pill to swallow. Intuitively, it seems like they really were wrong. Just full stop wrong. No qualifiers, no wrong relative to our time and place. Just wrong. It was wrong then, it's wrong now. Our intuition, most people's intuition, is that the Nazis were morally bad and that our society now is morally better than Nazi Germany. The United States now is morally better than it was under slavery. It's morally better than it was under segregation. But if moral relativism is true, then the one thing we definitely cannot say is that one society is morally better than another. Because every society has its own morality and you can't compare them. If moral relativism is true, then Nazi Germany is just a different society with different rules. Not better, not worse, just different. And that's a problem. And another very related problem is what's called the problem of moral progress. So many societies look like their moral beliefs have gotten better over time. The US had slavery, which was awful, morally awful. And then it had segregation, which was morally awful. And now it doesn't. It doesn't have slavery. It doesn't have, at least not legal segregation. There's de facto segregation in school systems and things like that. But it's better now than it used to be. It looks like we've made moral progress. The United States went from endorsing slavery and having legal slavery in one era to abhorring slavery and having no legal slavery of any kind in this later era. And that looks like moral progress. It's a genuine improvement in the society's morality over time, a genuine improvement in the society's moral beliefs over time. But if you're a moral relativist, then it looks like you might have to say that, okay, 1700s US with slavery and the 2000s United States without slavery are just two different societies that are each correct on their own terms, given their own moralities. Neither society is better or worse than another one, morally speaking. The US with slavery is not morally better than the US now without slavery, because they're two different societies and you can't compare different societies. Each society has its own morality and neither society can be better or worse, according to the moral relativist. So moral relativists might not be able to say that moral progress has ever been made. It's just a neutral change. There's no such thing as moral improvement over time, which seems like a problem because we intuitively think that we have made moral progress over time. And this is related to another problem, which is the problem of moral reformers, the people who cause moral progress, the people who make moral progress in a society. The people who come along and through great effort help change the moral beliefs of their society. Your Frederick Douglasses and your Martin Luther King Jr.'s and so on. Abolitionists, civil rights leaders, suffragettes, these are all examples of moral reformers. And what we normally say about them is that they are morally good people who led to genuine improvements in their societies. But the moral relativist says that each society makes its own morality. And moral reformers, by definition, go against the moral beliefs of their own society, their own time and place. They go against their society's moral views. Society says slavery is okay. Abolitionists fought against that. Society said segregation and racism are good. Civil rights leaders fought against that. Society said women shouldn't be able to own property or vote, and suffragettes fought against that. If there's no such thing as moral progress, then moral reformers didn't actually make improvements in the society. But even worse than that, it looks like they were morally wrong relative to their own societies. Moral relativists were morally bad in their time and place, which does not seem like something that we normally want to say. The abolitionists who fought against slavery were good. They were morally good. But in the time and society in which they lived, they went against their society's morality. So it looks like the moral relativist is going to have to say that for their time and place, abolitionists and civil rights leaders were morally bad. And that's not a thing you want to say. And notice, the moral relativist isn't just saying that, like, other people at the time thought they were morally bad. The moral relativist is saying, at the time, they really were morally bad. The slave owners who thought abolitionists were morally bad people were right for their time and place, according to the moral relativist. Or at least that's what it looks like the moral relativist is going to have to say. That seems implausible, or at least unpleasant to accept. That's not a consequence that seems right. And this is a lot of objections to moral relativism fall under this category. And I think they're summed up well by this quote from John Oliver in the pilot episode of Community, which is, if you haven't seen the show, I recommend it, first season especially. And it's on Hulu, if you have Hulu. And it's on, illegal pirating websites, if you're into that. Not that you should be, unless, our moral relativism is true and our society embraces it or something. So John Oliver in Community said, most people have a hard time saying booyah to moral relativism. And that is fundamentally the big objection to moral relativism the source of many objections to moral relativism is that most people have a hard time saying booyah to moral relativism. Most people have a hard time embracing the consequences of being a moral relativist. Having to say that, strictly speaking, Nazi Germany is not any morally worse than we are now, or that for their time and place, slave owners and Nazis did nothing wrong, or, at the time, Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Jr. and suffragettes were morally bad people. Like, those are all bad, unpleasant things. And you might sort of take Nazis are bad and Martin Luther King Jr. was good to sort of be Morian truths that you will hold on to and that with more certainty than any philosophical arguments to the contrary. And if you hold on to those as Morian truths, then you're going to end up rejecting moral relativism. Because if you really want to say Nazis are bad, full stop, they were wrong. Our society is better than Nazi Germany or slave-owning America in the 1700s. If you want to say that, then you can't be a moral relativist. And so if you take those to be Maurean moral truths, then moral relativism will have to be false. And that's the source of most of the objections against moral relativism. Now, that's moral relativism. And I'm going to stop this video now. And in the next video, we will talk about moral subjectivism. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.